Greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. We're here in the new digs. It's the same studio, just in a new space, new location. That means this is the very first time we've gone live. We tested it at length yesterday, but there's likely going to be some bugs, so just bear with us here today because this is a massive facility here and a transition of equipment. The Blaze brought a small army up to pull this thing off over the last week or so, along with our Aaron, and they did a fantastic job. You'll probably notice some sound improvements. The acoustics in here, for example, way tighter, way better than in our previous space. But as we welcome in Todd Erzin, who still won't take my advice and get a cortisone shot so he can stop walking around like a 90-year-old man, and Aaron McIntyre as well. All right. And there's Aaron's new digs for the very first time. And, of course, Aaron made sure to give himself the best backdrop and setup.
Still getting used to the alignment that we've got going on here. But, I built that myself. I didn't design it myself, but I built it myself.
You did. It's pretty sweet. I mean, your backdrop looks pretty sweet. So I don't know about you guys, but this feels like moving out of your parents' house for the first time in a way, because we've been in the Family Leaders office building for the last decade, just subleasing from them in the back garage space. And little things like now we got to get our own napkins. Now we got to buy our own toilet paper, right? And you're just used to mom and dad kind of having those things for you. And now I'm realizing we're going to have to like literally buy everything ourselves. So it's a little bit, we're going to take some time getting used to that. All right.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what level of Danny Tanner should I be preparing from you? In
17. 17. I mean, I've already told you there will be no eating in this room, contrary to the other place.
That's good.
All right. I'll set up eventually, once we get this all done and cleaned up, I'll set up a little sitting area and everything out there because we got plenty of space out there for it, but like no eating in here, nothing. All right. So 17 would be what I would, how about at least a number 9 for the Roy Hobbs jersey I'm wearing today to kick off our annual sports jersey week? At least a 9. And some days it might be up to a 17. So prepare yourself. All right. We are brought to you by our friends over at Trust and Will. To get the most out of life, you typically have to be prepared. And there are some, difficult conversations when it comes to end of life, when it comes to emergencies or tragedies that aren't really comforting to discuss, but we need to be prepared for. Sometimes we got to make sure that we are prepared for them. And we have those conversations even when they are not the most fun. The best way to get prepared is with our friends over at Trust and Will. It's the same company that we use in our household, Amy and I, for our estate situations, our end-of-life situations. Had Amy go through this a few years ago when they first came on board to try them out before I recommended them to you, and she absolutely raved about how simple and customizable they were. So if you want to make sure that you can't control everything, but you can at least take control of protecting you and your family's future, go to Trust and Will, the word and, trustandwill.com/Deace, and you'll get 20% off if you do. That's trustandwill.com, 20% off, trustandwill.com/Deace. That's trustandwill.com/Deace. Also, now's a great time. It's always a great time to support us here at Blaze TV. But if you're not yet a subscriber, you're missing out on a ton of exclusive content right now. And this is where we're still battling censorship regimes. Somehow, even with a new YouTube channel, they're claiming we have like 15,000 subscribers on YouTube, just a ridiculously low number. So if you want to make sure that you're getting all of our content unfettered, uncensored, and directly to you, the best way to do that is to become a subscriber at Blaze TV. It's just $8 a month when you use the promo code DACE. That's $20 off the annual plan, just 26 cents a day to support our network. I have to believe we're worth 26 cents a day. Given the expense the Blaze spent to move us into this new space, I'm confident of that, in fact. All right, so 26 cents a day if you go to blazetv.com/Deace, blazetv.com/Deace, and join us today at blazetv.com/Deace using the promo code DACE. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to get to some Ask Me Anything at the bottom of the hour. The bottom of hour 2, looking forward to this interview. Researcher extraordinaire Mike Benz is going to join the show for the first time. First heard about Mike about 2 years ago from Ginny Owens, Clarence Thomas's wife, actually. Ginny Thomas, I should say. I would say Ginny Owens. She's a Christian singer. Ginny Thomas pinged me one day and said, hey, have you heard of this Mike Benz guy? I think you should check him out. And so I've been following his work ever since. He's long overdue getting on the show. And great timing for Todd to finally make that connection with everything going on now with the DNI and then Tulsi Gabbard's revealing of documentation with Obama and Russian collusion. What did he know and when did he know it? I'm sure that'll be an Aaron's montage here in a moment, as well as the ongoing Epstein turmoil that we're seeing as well. So we'll get to that with Mike Benz coming up in the final segment of the show. But before we do anything else, let's kick it off as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
Should we say the artist formerly known as what happened while we were away?
Oh, so it wasn't just us.
I've just told everything was perfect yesterday during our dress rehearsal. Now everything has gone to heck. This is a banger montage too.
Because we hit live?
I think so. I think that's what really happened here. I'm getting no audio out of my main playback machine, but we'll figure it out here. Give me 2 seconds.
All right. 1,000. 2 1,000.
That was a quick 2 seconds.
Should we do like count the hiccups on day one? What do you think? Count the hiccups? That's the very first one. All right.
The spirit of the wasp endures.
Let's not, dude. Dude, let's just not even have that conversation. That can't possibly happen again. All right, now we're at like 15, 30 seconds, Aaron. Where are we at?
I still say we're at like 1 second.
You think you're at 1 second?
Yeah, I think we're at 1 second.
I mean, this is William Shatner called and said this pregnant pause is way longer than 1 segment. I mean, this is way longer than 1 segment. What does the audience think?
I came in at this morning to get ready, and there was just a nonstop beep, just beep. Like I mean, within 2 minutes I was going crazy, and that meant that our UPS, our power supply, was actually going out, and so we've had to shut down a bunch of stuff this morning, and it's gotten messed up quite a bit, but. That's what's going on here. We're endeavoring. We're doing our best.
The power supply went out?
Is that important?
It might be kind of important.
I think we might be good now.
All right, let's try.
I think we might be
See,
good.
I didn't want to get in any issues because I didn't want to step on your montage. So we've just been sitting here just frankly stalling and rather uncomfortably so.
Todd, say a Hail Mary. What happened while we were away, brought to you by A Time for Consequences. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard released a damning series of evidence since we last spoke, detailing how the Obama administration colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign during and after the 2016 election to formulate and promulgate the Russian collusion narrative, which of course besieged the first Trump White House. Included in the evidence is a newly declassified intelligence community memo in the immediate aftermath of the 2016 election, which stated the intel community's belief that Russia did not successfully interfere with that election. That memo was scuttled as it made its way up the chain of command based on quote-unquote new guidance. It's just one of many smoking guns Gabbard unveiled late last week, and she says there's more coming.
There's no question in my mind that this intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered be published, which contained a manufactured intelligence document. It's worse than even politicization of intelligence. It was manufactured intelligence that sought to achieve President Obama and his team's objective, which was undermining President Trump's presidency and subverting the will of the American people. So yes, next week we will be releasing more detailed information about how exactly this took place and the extent to which this information was sought to be hidden from the American people, hidden from officials who would be in a position to do something about it. And that's really the point here that I think is most important, Maria.
The Wall Street Journal, citing a source named Trust Me Bro, dropped a story late last week detailing a supposed birthday letter written by President Trump to Jeffrey Epstein on the latter's 50th birthday, featuring a hand-drawn sketch of a naked woman. Apparently, one of the things Trump wrote was a fictitious conversation written between Trump and Epstein, written in the third person, wherein Trump uses the word enigma, which is definitely something Trump says regularly. Trump has sued the Wall Street Journal for defamation. The Department of Justice has sacked Southern District of New York prosecutor Maureen Comey. That's the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey. Why it's happening in July and not January is beyond anybody's comprehension. Israel apologized late last week for a deadly strike on Gaza's only Catholic church, which killed 3 people. The Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, which is jurisdiction for the Roman Catholics in Gaza, said the Holy Family Church was struck by Israel on Thursday morning. The office of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that, quote, Israel deeply regrets that a stray ammunition hit Gaza's Holy Family Church. Every innocent life lost is a tragedy, end quote. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee visited the Christian-Palestinian town of Taiba in the West Bank on Saturday, which has been the scene of several attacks by settlers in recent weeks. Taiba residents and local church leaders said the town had experienced an upsurge in settler harassment recently. They pointed to an arson attack, which they said was committed by extremist settlers next to the ruins of the Church of St. George in the town last week as the most serious incident so far. Ambassador Huckabee said in multiple statements there must be harsh punishments for those responsible, including a veiled jab at Israeli authorities, reiterating there must be punishments and not just reprimands. Back at home, there's now a formal push within the Republican Party for amnesty. Here's Florida Republican Representative Maria Salazar pushing the Dignity Act.
President Trump, sir, the same God who saved you from death in Pennsylvania 1 year ago and who put you back in the Oval Office against all odds is the same God Almighty who millions and millions are begging to for some type of dignity, not amnesty. Sir, I believe that you could be for immigration what Lincoln was for slavery and Reagan was for communism. You are a businessman who understands our economy needs a reliable working force in areas where other Americans don't participate. You stopped Iran on its tracks. You stopped China from eating our lunch. You took the economic oxygen away from Maduro, and you signed the BBB the day that you said you were going to sign it. You have been called to do this.
The WNBA All-Star Game featured players who took the floor to warm up with shirts with the words written on them, "Pay us what you owe us." The WNBA, as you know, has never made a profit. Speaking of female ingrates, CBS has canned Late Show host Stephen Colbert. The network says the move was made purely for financial reasons. Some reports indicate Colbert was losing the network upwards of $40 million a year. And finally, pro golfer Scottie Scheffler won the Open Championship for the first time in his career over the weekend, adding to what has been a dominating run in that sport for that American. Scheffler has been increasingly open about his faith in recent years, saying recently that golfing, as good as he is as it, doesn't really fill the hole in his heart the way things like his faith and family do. After winning the Open, Scheffler was joined by his family, including his toddling son, to add some wholesomeness to the victorious moment. It was the genesis for this new tear-jerking Nike advertisement, which showed Scheffler with his small son on the links with the words, "You've already won," and then a second frame with Scheffler swinging his club with the caption, "But another major never hurt." Compare that Nike marketing to their marketing 5 years ago, and we see you, Nike. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. You know, we've got those ongoing tariff wars. And don't forget, China does still control about 85% of our antibiotic supply. So, I mean, there's talk of tariffs in the 200 percentile that we could be seeing on medications. That could lead to a huge increase in the price of emergency medications and prescriptions like your daily medications. That's where our friends at Jace Medical come in for just these kinds of moments, just these kinds of shortages to make sure you're prepared that they can't ever do to you and me what they did to us during COVID. And that's when Jace Medical came on. They came to us at the blaze at the tail end of COVID. They were very concerned at what they saw the system do to venerable medications like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, things that have won Nobel Prizes, have saved tens of millions of lives all over the globe. They wanted to make sure that they could help people be equipped should that ever happen again. And that's where the Jace case comes in. All right, you can get yours right now with a backup of some of the most important antibiotics in all of human history. And now they've expanded their menu as well so that you can do customizable add-ons for what you specifically need to. All right, use the promo code DACE when you check out for the discount at jace.com. JASE, use the promo code DACE for the discount to check out at jace.com, promo code DACE. All right, we're going to spend a good deal of time tomorrow talking about the accountability front. And these new allegations that Tulsi Gabbard has come forth with. Can I just say this, by the way, just as an aside? I am fascinated that somehow the Democrats managed to just completely leave in place documentation that directly links, that is direct proof of former President Barack Obama at the tail end of his administration, knowing very well that the entire Russia collusion narrative was a complete and total hoax. and engaging in and yet instigating the psyop surrounding that story, nevertheless, and urging it. Which to me, I mean, is if that's not treasonous, I guess I just don't know. I mean, just literally short of just catching somebody on the phone, just handing over, passwords and codes, to Beijing. And then I don't know what else is treason anymore if that's not it. But I am fascinated that somehow the Democrats left that documentation in place on their way out the door, guys. But at the same token, they doctored and purged and broke the chain of evidence on the Epstein documentation. Did they just forget that? I'm fascinated by this idea that they somehow doctored and purged the Epstein information so we can't ever get the truth there. But they left in place direct link documented evidence of the most successful Democratic president so far of this century. Arguably the most successful Democratic president in terms of resetting the board since FDR early in the last century. So they somehow left that all in place for Tulsi Gabbard to reveal. Like there's reports out, there's more coming out even today. That's another reason why I want to wait another day before we get into this, because Trump is urging and messaging that something tangible needs to be done about this. So let's give it another news cycle, because all this broke on a Friday. We had the weekend, everything's slow. Let's give it one full day here on a Monday to see what, if anything, is advanced about this, just beyond subcommittee. Potential James Comer subcommittee talking points will all just, be aghast at and drool over on shows like this, but then nothing will come of it. Let's wait and see, okay? Plus, we're going to discuss this in the overtime today. I put out a poll over the weekend asking people if they think this will lead to anything, and the numbers are staggering. So we're going to get into that in the overtime today for Blaze TV subscribers. But I am fascinated that somehow intact remains evidence directly linking, putting Barack Obama's very fingerprints on the Russia collusion narrative. But yet they left that in place, the Democrats did, while doctoring, changing, purging the Epstein documentation. Does that make any sense to either one of you? Just yes or no?
Of course it doesn't.
Aaron, make any sense to you?
Yes. The only sense that it would make is that the Epstein documents are that much more damaging, but I'm reaching really hard.
All right. So let's spend a couple of moments here talking about the sports stories that were in your thing, because I do think they do speak broadly to where we are as a culture, and in many respects represent the two worldviews that are literally battling for soul and dominion of America as we speak. And the timing of Scottie Scheffler in the lead up to the British Open, the oldest major championship in the sport of golf, in the lead up to that, essentially giving us a sermon on the book of Ecclesiastes. All right. Yes, I'm the number one golfer in the world. Yes, I've made all this money. Yes, I've accomplished all this kind of stuff, and I'm on the most dominant run we've seen since Tiger Woods. But the reality is, you win one, and that's great in the moment, but the cheers and stuff go away, and what remains? That doesn't fill you. And by the way, the contrast between him and Tiger Woods, where you saw Tiger Woods, who went from an atheist to a Buddhist, which just means he just became another form of atheist. That's essentially what Buddhists are. They're functional atheists. So he went from an atheist to, when his life blew up was it 2009 or 10, when he had the one car accident over the Thanksgiving weekend, and then that kind of was the tug on the thread of the sweater that Weezer used to undo and unravel his life at the time. And he came out like a lot of us do. I did myself. When you hit rock bottom, you turn to something bigger than you, except in his case, he did not. He announced he had embraced Buddhism, which is not bigger than him. Actually, was just another variation of atheism. But yet the whole life plan. Tiger Woods was really, you look again at the Roy Hobbs jersey I'm wearing today. One of the great lines in the movie The Natural. What do you want out of life? What do you want out of life, Roy? One day I walk down the street and people look at me and say, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best damn hitter that ever lived. He's quoting Ted Williams when he says that, by the way. Bernard Malamud, who wrote the original book, that's a line from Ted Williams. That was what he said. He wanted his life to be about. The greatest people. I walk down the street and people say, there goes Ted Williams, the best damn hitter that ever lived. Nothing more than that, Roy? No, not what more to it is there? That was kind of what drove Tiger Woods for about a decade. And then the fixation on that. The place of prominence you put that in your life, and the term we're looking for here theologically is idolatry. I mean, Tiger Woods put golf in a place that only God is supposed to fill. And because he didn't have God filling those places, he did what those of us who also make that mistake do. He self-medicated in a lot of different ways. It's just his were way more available to him given his fame and fortune. And all of that got exposed in the most embarrassing of ways. His career has never really recovered. He's had the injuries and everything else. He had the one glorious moment at the Masters, but that's the only major that Tiger has won since his world collapsed almost 15 years ago. And given his age and health, it's probably the last major he's going to win. When 2008, 2009, it was pretty much a lock bet he was going to pass Jack Nicklaus's 18 major wins and break that record, and he's now not going to be able to do that likely. And you contrast that with Scottie Scheffler, who's still really in the midst of his ascent. He's still kind of ascending as a golfer. Just immediately saying, this really isn't all that fulfilling. I enjoy doing it. I love doing it. I try to be the best at it I can be. I'm gifted at it. But, after I win in an event and the applause and stuff goes away, what am I left with? And then right after he says that, he goes out in what is traditionally the most mercurial major tournament in golf every year because of the conditions. They play on links or public courses over there in Europe. And he just goes out there and dusts the field, has a top 5 all-time win score. Only 4 other people have done better than 17 under in the British Open to win it in the history of that major. Did
you see that stat of his? He made like 58 of 63 putts inside of 10 feet. That's insane.
That is insane. It's just absolutely insane. And so the timing of that is like cosmic, man. The timing of that. He goes out there with one of the largest platforms in all of sports, preaches a sermon, and then goes out there and dominates right after that. That's incredible. That is Babe Ruth World Series against the Cubs, calling your shot kind of stuff. Joe Namath, prior to the Super Bowl, sitting by the pool telling the media, I guarantee we're going to win. It's that kind of thing. And you contrast that now, not with just the last time we saw a stretch this dominant, and Scheffler's not approaching where Tiger was in his dominance yet. But again, he's kind of just now on the ascent. Let's check back in here in 2 to 3 years. But this is the most dominant stretch we've seen since Tiger. And you contrast that now with the WNBA. A league there is no market for, has never been a market for. That's why it's generated no profit. It's been a subsidy from the very beginning. It was subsidized specifically as a political construct. That's why it was created. It is literally DEI incarnate. They have one narrow path to actually being a profitable venture, but because the player that would grant them that is white and straight, they do everything they possibly can to both abuse her on the court and defecate, against her off said court. While at the same time they're doing that to her, she not only doesn't go Michael Jordan on these people and just humiliate him at every turn, realizing she's bigger than the league. She not only does not do that, she actually goes further into groveling to them, wearing their stupid propaganda shirts, having nothing to say at all about the integrity or the preservation of women's sports, which is exactly what gave her the opportunity to be as relevant and wealthy as she is. Now, there's a term we usually typically call people who take advantage of a situation that was granted to them, and then when that situation is in dire predicament after they're gone and has enriched them and they have nothing to say, the term there is ingrate, by the way. She's nowhere to be found anywhere. In fact, if we're being honest, as unlikable as she is, Angel Reese has said way more about defending women's sports than Caitlin Clark has, if we're being honest about that. And it's not like she said a ton. She's just actually said some things, and Caitlin said like nothing. She's like completely MIA in the whole battle, while groveling to the very elements that want to completely dehumanize her. I mean, that, gentlemen, that is, and in ways that probably the political world is incapable of articulating, just because way more people, as Todd laments every day on the show, way more people are emotionally invested in the sports world than they are in the political world. But so that's why because of that, Todd, that's why I wanted to take advantage of this moment to articulate. You want to know, when we talk about worldview steel cage match, 2 worldviews enter, only one's coming out. The worldview that led to the creation of the WNBA and has sustained it and promotes it way more. The WNBA gets more promotion than Major League Baseball does. More people probably know who Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark is than Shohan Ohtani, I would guess, or Aaron Judge, or Tarek Skubal. It way outweighs what its actual input and output is, the level of promotion it gets. And yet that's not good enough. We're still ungrateful. And you contrast that with Scottie Scheffler, married with a kid, no prolonged adolescence. Tiger prolonged his adolescence well into his 30s to some degree. No prolonged adolescence. Literally just giving homilies before major championships and then going out there and just dusting these fools, okay? I mean, the contrast, these are the worldviews that are at stake right now in the West, and only one of them is going to prevail. So I wanted to make sure we took a few moments here today, because these are being manifested in places and ways. If you're tuned into this show, man, you know, you guys are every bit as engaged as we are. I mean, you guys give us a lot of tips of things to talk about, guests to book. So when I say the lack of people that are engaged, we're not talking about you guys. We're assuming if you're here, giving us 2 hours a day or paying the Blaze, you're pretty engaged, okay? But outside of people like you, there are way more people, way more engaged in the WNBA All-Star break and the British Open than what's happening on Capitol Hill or their state capitol. So I wanted to make sure we spent a few minutes today talking about the fact that they got an eyeful and an earful about the worldview clash that we are in the midst of right now in America that we talk about in our show every day, man.
And I'm so glad you went there. Ingrate is the word of the day. If this was Sesame Street, I have given Caitlin Clark maximum grace on this front because she is, for good or for bad, a transcendent sports figure. But that doesn't mean she's going to be successfully transcendent. And I'm done on giving her maximum levels of grace. She's failing on this front, but she's not unique. And I want to point out that the ingrate thing applies across the board. Scottie Scheffler is a choice. It's not just going to happen. And the way he lives his life, and Nike saying, you've already won. Did you see Pat McAfee talking about this? Pat McAfee is sports pro incarnate, but he's absolutely moved by this moment. Well, going forward, it's going to be a choice, because my whole point about sports pro and college football, same level of ingrate. Same level of ingrate. That's the one thing I disagree with. But there's no market, I agree, for WNBA. But when we all live together and share each other's successes, we should lift each other up and be grateful for that opportunity. The same applies to what college football is doing. We should be grateful for what we had instead of the lie about there's just too much money. This is so much. So everybody has to look Scottie Scheffler at what he did and say, did you already win? Do we really believe that? Because if you do, you'll live entirely differently than the lies we're telling across so many fronts.
This is what stands out to me about Scottie Scheffler in particular, and I totally agree. This is a great illustration of the choice ahead for the broader culture. But this is what gets me about Scottie Scheffler. This has been a prolonged, sustained period of time. He doesn't need to talk about God and his faith and his family. He's at the top. He's on top of the world, but yet he still does. To me, that indicates a level of humility that is so absent, like real humility that is just so absent elsewhere.
Amen. All right, when we come back, it's going to be your turn. It's time to ask me anything. Stay tuned. Hey, we got some breaking news I'm going to get to here in a second after I tell you about our friends over at Preborn. You know, we've been celebrating America's independence here the entire month of July. But tragically, every day, thousands of unborn lives are taken because they're not given the right to life that was supposedly enshrined in our Declaration of Independence as the organic law here of these United States of America. And that's where you and I come in this partnership that we've had with the Blaze and Preborn's networks of clinics that provide free ultrasounds to women with unplanned pregnancies. And not only do they save lives, but I would argue they take part in perhaps saving the souls of these moms, because something unique does happen. We've witnessed this politically. We just saw it in the last election where this became the major campaign plank of one of America's political parties. It literally ran on let guys blast off in your womb and that don't care about you and impregnate you and then just go murder your kids as many times as you want. That was literally one of the major messaging planks the Democratic Party ran on. So this is where you and I come in, and boy, we have done so phenomenally. Is that a word? I think so. Up to 70,000 babies last year, preborn saved. And you guys, with your generosity here at the Blaze, were a big part in making that happen. Some of you can give thousands of dollars, but did you know for as little as $28, you can fund an ultrasound that doubles a baby's chance at life as soon as today? Make that tax-deductible donation today when you go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. And you can also just dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone, or go to preborn.com/Steve. All right, before we get to Ask Me Anything, I mentioned we have some breaking news. So my instincts on holding off making any broad pronouncements on the accountability front until we gave today's news cycle time to percolate a little bit have already kind of been proven true. So just in the last 15 minutes, these two stories have broken. All right. Jerome Powell, head of the Federal Reserve, has been referred to the Department of Justice for criminal perjury charges related to a $2.5 billion, quote, renovation of the Federal Reserve building. And Representative Luna is alleging that Powell falsely downplayed the project's $600 million cost increase and denied luxury features like a VIP dining room and rooftop garden were being constructed when, in fact, they were, according to Congresswoman Luna. So she has referred the Fed Chairman, Jerome Powell, to Pam Bondi's office for perjury, for criminal perjury before Congress. Also, just in the last 15 minutes, Tulsi Gabbard has handed over, as the director of national intelligence, she has handed over the receipts to launch a criminal investigation on the claims that Aaron alluded to in his montage. That was one of the breaking news stories over the weekend, hit on Friday afternoon, that Barack Obama and his administration knew all along that the Russian collusion narrative was a scam. And yet they instigated perpetuation of that hoax, nevertheless, which led to impeachment against Trump after he was elected. We went through the independent counsel that was done to stymie and thwart the Trump administration the first 2/3 of his first term. All right, so let's get some reaction to both of those news stories breaking in just the last 15 minutes.
The second one is far more substantive ultimately to me. I mean, the first one, it has a little bit of a ring to Capone on tax evasion, particularly because, like, Luna's talked a big game before on things. I mean, if there's smoke here, go after it. But the first one, Tulsi's just, I think, a more honest broker, a more serious broker. And she's had her sights on doing this kind of nonsense for a very, very long time. More power to her.
Yeah, I think perjury kind of surprised me with the Powell stuff. Maybe this is maybe the genesis of where these rumors that he's about ready to step down came from. So that kind of surprised me. On the second issue, yeah, I agree. That's more, I guess, serious. But we have to have some of the clappers, the Comeys. We have to have some big Brennans. We have to have some big names here.
Schiff.
In handcuffs.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just any sort of low-level staffer that they can try to pin this on. That's not going to cut it at all. If we even get that, which again, I'm trying. I appreciate Gabbard's aggressiveness here in the last several days, last few days, as this story has broken. but the Department of Justice has to match or exceed that level of aggression.
Well, we've been saying on the show for the last week or so that let's give our team a benefit of the doubt, whether it deserves it or not, just for the sake of a thought exercise. Let's give our team the benefit of the doubt, and let's say that truly disclosing the full nature of Jeffrey Epstein's travails and clientele and where his funding came from and all that other stuff has real geopolitical consequences. I mean, look how much the whole thing blew up this weekend. I mean, the Israelis have been aggressive militarily for a calendar year now, okay? And this is really the first real case of collateral damage blowback they have received. They've been so precise in their military engagements. They had one piece of real collateral damage blowback, or one piece of collateral damage and it was this Catholic church there in Gaza. Look at the amount of blowback that produced. Okay.
This is a great comparison.
And you even have people like Michael Knowles, a great guy, one of the smartest guys, I think, in our business. He's pretty staunchly pro-Israel. Even he's like, hey, you're starting to lose me with stuff like this. I mean, this, I think, gives you an idea of how tenuous some of this stuff is right now within our own coalition, within our own base. Okay. So let's just assume that is the real reason why Trump has suddenly gone reticent to go gung-ho on the Epstein front, and not some of this other stuff, which frankly, I just don't think passes muster. That's why I asked the question a few minutes ago. I just have a hard time believing that the Democrats left in place direct smoking gun links to Barack Obama instigating the Russian collusion hoax, but just somehow they let that go, but somehow purged and doctored the Epstein files. I don't necessarily buy that, okay? But I can see also why, if you're Trump, you'd prefer to tell people that than what I just said, because that just, you say that just creates more of that. So that tension is there. It does exist. Let's push on that stuff a little bit more. You see what I'm saying? So let's say that's the reason why Trump is suddenly reticent to go down this Epstein road. What have we been telling you for the last week? Then they're going to have to offer up another high-value target, right? This is the underperformance on accountability has been stark compared to the performance overall of this administration. Today is its 6-month anniversary. So then you're going to have to offer people something else. If the cost of Epstein, at least right now, is too high, not saying I buy that, just trying to give my team some benefit of the doubt, because we are in the midst of a civil war here, okay? So if you give them some benefit of the doubt on that maybe they know some things that we don't know geopolitically, that maybe we're not ready to know quite yet, fine. Then you're going to have to offer up another substitutionary atonement here. Because just to just not have consequences for what went on the last 5 years. Someone came at me on X over the weekend after the Tulsi stuff came out, and I said, call me when someone gets referred to the DOJ. Well, that just happened 15 minutes ago, okay? And one guy says, hey, this story's been out one day. I said, no, it's not about this story, brother. It's about the fact they've been in office for 6 months. We've undergone 5 years. How is it possible we underwent the worst invasion of our homeland in American history, the worst political hoax in his? I think the Biden administration's even worse than the Russia collusion hoax, as incredible as that is, because an entire presidency was just literally just concocted like something between Dave and House of Cards right in front of us, while we all knew they were gaslighting us the entire time, okay? And then there's the largest censorship regime that we've ever seen deployed in American history. Somehow just those three things, no one's worthy of getting arrested. No one is in 6 months. So it's not about they had this come out on Friday, they had no time to act on it. It's about 6 months of inaction. So if it's not going to be that for right now, if it's not going to be Epstein, and we'll get into more of that with Mike Benz later in the show, then there's going to need to be another high value target. Would these be the kinds of high value? I don't think Powell is.
He isn't.
I think Powell maybe is just a nice move to get him out of the Federal Reserve, to put your own person in there that's going to be friendlier to your agenda. All right. So what about what Tulsi is alleging with the Obama administration and Russia collusion? If that slides into the space that Epstein was in for the last few weeks, does that change the gravitational pull of that energy? Is that a substitutionary atonement from a accountability standpoint?
If they're willing to follow the truth wherever it leads and initiate appropriate consequences, yeah. And then some, because this goes all the way to the desk of a former president.
Aaron, what do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. As long as it's a big name. somebody that you're making an example out of.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could make the case, why hide the trail on one case when it comes to Epstein but not the other? I could make a case that would be totally on brand for Barack Obama, and that is his own hubris, which has led the Democrat Party to where they are right now. It's his own ego and hubris. But it has to be something like that where these deep state creatures, whether it's Obama or anybody else in that cabal, anybody tangential to them, has to think twice, thrice, 4 times, whatever the word is for that, about pulling the type of crap that they've tried to pull on this entire country going on over a decade now.
Yep.
I'd be down with that. But it has to be a big name, and it has to be real consequences. Prison. That's what we've been preaching for years now. Prison. There has to be real accountability. That's why I opened the montage up with a time for consequences. Okay? That's what I meant by that. This is a time for consequences.
Last thing on this front, real quick. Pam Bondi. Tense or relieved that these two things are being placed on her desk. I actually think relieved. Okay. I actually think she's relieved. But what do you guys think?
Tense.
You think it's tense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was defaulting towards tense. I mean, I'm happy to hear, you haven't talked about this off air, so
I have to believe some kind of heads up is at work here. I just, given the level of disciplined rollout we've largely seen from this administration for 6 months, I cannot possibly believe that Pam Bondi is just shocked to hear that a very well-known MAGA Republican congresswoman is going to refer Jerome Powell to her office she found out right 10 minutes before the rest of us did. I don't believe that. And I have to believe, especially with an entire weekend now. Let's say Tulsi to make sure to maintain the presentation of independence, because frankly, the director of national intelligence is supposed, and both the attorney general, they're in the executive branch, but they're both leading departments that have to be somewhat independent of the political process, right? Okay. So let's say, and that maybe is why Tulsi dropped this on a Friday afternoon in a Friday news dump to make it look as the least amount of political and coordinated as possible. Fine. But I have to believe between Friday afternoon and today, okay, 78 hours has gone by. I have to believe some conversations were had about a plan of attack moving forward rather than just hand Pam Bondi a hot potato in her beleaguered state. I'd be very surprised if they did that to Pam. Instead, this is like a slump buster, okay? This is like a hanging curve, okay? And we're serving this up to you on a platter to get your credibility back and make everybody forget about Epstein and the stupid binders and all that stuff.
But I think the question needs to be asked is the point all along to have been really buttoned up and on target in all these other areas because they never wanted to be in this area and they're hoping that would satisfy everybody? And because that's utterly not going to happen, and to MAGA credit's the base's credit, they won't let it happen. Bondi's like, oh crap, it didn't work.
I think given the underperformance in this area, they deserve the skepticism that you just articulated.
That's where I'm coming from with my tense analysis, because she's just not shown that level of aggression that we need, that we expected, and that really is unacceptable. So I hope that she's viewing this as an opportunity, but I think she's probably more along the lines of, oh crap, I really actually have to do something now.
If you guys are right, looking at the clock, I don't know that we have time to start AMA. So we'll do that at the top of the next hour. We just wanted to make sure we got this breaking news on the air because it literally happened in the break. Both of these stories did right here as we're doing the show live. If Pam Bondi is tense, then she has to go right now. Okay. I mean, my Detroit Tigers have a reliever named Tommy Conley. And his ERA in the last 9 appearances is like 47. And I'm only exaggerating a little bit. Okay. You just get to a point where a guy is in such a hole, you can't trot him back out there again. And when you bring him out of the bullpen, the confidence of the other 8 guys on the diamond, like, here we go, we're going to blow this one too, right? If Pam Bondi is tense, then she has to go. You cannot you can't handle someone that you are not 100% confident is prepared for it. A former U.S. president as a target of interest. You just can't do that. You cannot put that in her hands. You just simply cannot. You just can't. You just cannot do that. All right. You better be coming out of the bullpen, with Raleigh Fingers, okay? Bruce Sutter, okay? Mariano Rivera. This is a former sitting U.S. president. You don't hand it to somebody who right now in their last 6 bullpen appearances has an ERA of 47. You can't do that. All right. So if she is tense, she has to go now. Then this has to be handed to an adult and a professional.
I think she's tense because to your 3-point analysis, she's a groupie, not a crusader, and we need a crusader. And the MAGA is, and what was the other one? The gangster.
Gangsters, crusaders, and groupies.
She's a groupie, and MAGA has said loud and clear, you're not getting away with that.
I mean, if you can't, you just, and let me say this too. The Democrats tried to put a former president in prison for over 90 years, long past his, realistic lifespan, for potentially not disclosing a $130,000 hush money payment to a porn star almost 20 years ago. What we're talking about here is essentially, at the very least, prima facie treason. At the very least. Meaning worthy of consideration. Maybe the proof isn't in the pudding, but it's at least worthy of consideration for what the term can also mean. So, absolutely, if you think you have the goods, you have to make an example out of him. But I think at that point, though, you call out of the bullpen the best arm that you have. All right? You can't have a former president be somebody's slump buster. That is too high value of a target. You call out of the bullpen the best arm that you have. So either she's prepared for this and is relieved that something now that is more in her wheelhouse has arrived, which is kind of what my hypothesis is, and frankly, I'm hoping is true. Okay. So maybe there's some hopium there. I'm going to admit to that. All right. Or you guys are right. And if you guys are right, she cannot be handed something of this magnitude then.
I just think the issue that she's going to have, or she or anybody, Pam Bondi, Ram Hondi is going to have is with Obama is it's really going to be hard to charge him with treason since he wasn't, actually born here. Thank you, Babylon Bee.
Nice. Very nice. Did they have that headline?
Yeah.
Trump's the one he's the one posting
great.
AI videos of Obama getting arrested. Like, dude, you're kind of setting the bar.
Indeed, we are. All right, we'll come back. Your turn to ask me anything. I mean it this time, unless someone else gets referred to a prosecution in the next 5 minutes. All right, stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Our first day here in the new space. A lot of the same studio, new space though, but that also gave us an opportunity to upgrade, tweak some things as well. So once the bugs are ironed out, hopefully you're going to hear a sound that is superior. The acoustics are definitely better in the more confined space that we're in today. Aaron's backdrop is pretty lit, as the kids say, as well. That's pretty dope.
It's going to be more lit on Thursday.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like you've got 5 o'clock shadow, but the backdrop is great. Right?
I'm slightly dead. Yeah, I'm slightly dead.
Yeah, I meant though the shadow, the literal shadow that's half your face is what I meant.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then also subscribe here to the podcast version if you are a podcast listener. Thank you. You're the biggest chunk of our audience. You can subscribe or hit follow on iTunes, Apple, subscribe everywhere else. Then also make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Tens of thousands of you have done that for the show. Thank you. We appreciate each and every one. You know what I forgot to mention too with the kickoff of Jersey Week with the New York Knights jersey is I'm wearing the lightning patch here. And remember the great scene where Roy Hobbs knocked the cover off the ball in the lightning storm? Do you remember how he got into the game? Because guy got benched. Michael Madsen's character, who was the starting right fielder in his place, got benched.
Wow.
Right? And we just lost Michael Madsen a few weeks ago. I forgot about that.
I had forgotten about that.
Do you remember when we tried to get him on the show, Aaron? He was going to come on. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, we had Michael Madsen. I thought was it Michael Madsen? I thought we had scheduled to come on a couple times for a movie, and he couldn't get Zoom or something to work. I thought it was him. Was it not him?
No, that was the guy from Get Shorty.
Oh, that's right. In Goonies. It was that guy instead. Okay.
Oh, that kind of rings a bell.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that guy instead. My bad. Anyway, so rest in peace, Michael Madsen. All right. So from one of my favorite movies of my childhood, The Natural. Hey, folks, we are brought to you by our friends over at Moxie Pest Services. And let's face it, there are some horror stories out there when it comes to working with pest control businesses. That's why you want to go with Moxie and why they've been a leader in this space for going on a quarter century now. In fact, this is their 25th anniversary here in the year 2025. And we could get into all the typical pest service talking points that all the other companies around the country are going to offer you. Here's why we signed up to help promote Moxie, is because of how much focus and energy that they put on training and customer service, going the extra mile. It's the little things. Like this has happened to me. You come home and the gate's wide open to your back door or your backyard because the pest control people just left it wide open, or you gave them the garage code. They didn't close the garage and they left that open so anybody could just come in your house. Stuff like that, where you can tell they didn't wipe their feet or cover their feet. They just tracked into your house, right? These are the kinds of things, these are the little things that are big things that add up that Moxie focuses on. That's made them a trusted name and gives you peace of mind that your home is truly being cared for. And they follow up with their agents every single day to make sure they've got the latest tech, but also the latest customer service practices as well. So if you want to get started with Moxie, help them celebrate 25 years in the business, get your first pest control service with them for just $25. You can't beat that cost. $25 to see if they live up to their name. MOXIE is how it's spelled. MoxieServices.com/Steve. Make sure to use the promo code Steve to get that $25 first pest control service deal. Again, using the promo code Steve at MoxieServices.com/Steve. Use the promo code Steve. All right, Mike Benz going to join us at the bottom of the hour, but now delayed but undeterred, it is your turn to ask me anything. Todd has curated questions coming from our audience over on X. I've not seen any of these questions at all. You guys are going to hit me with them cold. Aaron, you have said questions. All right, let's rock and roll.
We're going to begin with John Bielek, who says, when I first got the blaze for my mom, she continues to love your show, but she said, I hope he doesn't talk to his wife that way. The first time I blew it off and said they're just guys giving opinions. Months later, she said it again. I responded with, he's paid to give his opinions. The third time I asked, what exactly do you mean by that? I hope he doesn't talk to his wife that way. She said he's just so staunch and confident in what he says. I wonder if he listens to his wife. Do you want to take this opportunity to reassure all the female members of your audience that you do, in fact, listen to your wife?
Well, first of all, this is actually a great observation by your mom. All right. So your mom is a wise woman to ask a question like this. But secondly, the answer is as often as I possibly can. And there have been moments where I did just run off half-cocked and did not. And those did not work out. All right. So, I mean, I don't endorse candidates for office. My wife has not met even up to President of the United States. I don't do that. I don't get into business with people that my wife has not assessed. She's a real bloodhound when it comes to human nature. So by all means, I mean, I had a bit of a sticky wicket over the weekend that I had to handle. And I went to her and about what she thought was a wise way to do it. And then I just followed her advice literally verbatim, and it worked out. So your mom is wise to ask this question. And yes, you know, sometimes we use the translation for the Hebrew word there in Genesis for this reason a man will cleave or leave his family and cleave to his wife, and the two will become one. Sometimes we use the Hebrew word there for wife that Moses uses there as helpmate. Another translation that maybe is even more dramatic is rescuer. All right. So my wife is not a feminist. In fact, she detests it with pretty much every fiber of her being. Okay. But she's also very wise and is, the best gift God's ever given me, other than my own salvation. So as often as I possibly can, I do exactly what your mom is asking me about. So that's an excellent question, John. Surprised it's never really come up before on the show, frankly. Good stuff.
Cam Dotton is next. Which are more real, aliens or prosecutions from this DOJ?
Well, you know our position on aliens. Show us the bodies, otherwise leave us alone.
Same standard here, right?
So I think maybe the same, show us the handcuffs, right? I think that applies. Now, I will tell you, in the last, well, now it's been 20 minutes, we've had 2 major criminal prosecutions of people who matter, prosecution referrals for people who matter. A former president of the United States and the current, maybe the most powerful man in the government to not have an elected office, the head of the Federal Reserve, right? So those aren't, let me go ahead and patronize the grift core that I'm paying paying out of my pocket to. These are not trivialities. These targets, even if Jerome Powell's accusation, as Todd said, is the equivalent of tax evasion for Al Capone. In terms of value target, he is an Al Capone. I'm not saying he is Al Capone morally, but in terms of the magnitude of the target, he would be in that space. That's a very powerful man. All right. So I might have answered this question totally differently even 30 minutes ago. If we had done Ask Me Anything as we planned, and this was the second question, and then I interrupted that to bring breaking news, I'd have been like, well, let me take that answer back. Maybe walk that one back a little bit. So my instincts were to let this play out today and see what reaction we had with starting with Tulsi's story, since that broke on a Friday, with an entire weekend, and now everything was shut down, and now everything's back open. And so far, 2 massive names have been sent to Pam Bondi's desk. So that's not a nothing. We don't know yet how much of a something it is, but that's not a nothing. It's not.
Next, we go to this from DunJ62, who asks your take on Joel Berry, who said over the weekend, I believe, all these days are running together to me, this won't be easy for people to hear, but there are only about 200 professed Catholics still living in Gaza, and they all support Hamas. What's your take on that?
So I can't possibly speak to the spiritual condition of, first of all, Joel is correct about the minuscule amount of Christians that are still living in Gaza. There has been a massive purge of Christians in Gaza going back to when Hamas took control in 2006. I think prior to October 7th, if my memory serves, I think the number of total Christians living in Gaza was as little as 1,200. So I know you guys are constantly being sold this idea that this is like some mass population of people. It is not. Doesn't mean, by the way, they're not significant, but I think, just like a lot of people thought, what was the number of people thought was like 40% or 60% with the poll during COVID that thought you went to hospital with COVID, and the number was, 4.
Not that.
Okay, it was not that, right? So I want to make sure people don't misconstrue this. All right, with the number, we can get into whether Joel's because there's 2 pieces of analysis here in response to Joel. Are his numbers right, and then does he is his analysis of the worldviews correct? All right, his numbers are probably likely very accurate. So let's tackle that one first, because I think that's the least subjective part, right? The amount of Christians in Gaza, even before the current war started, had greatly dwindled under Hamas. That's number one, okay? So, because I heard people kind of, bristle at that from Joel as well. I think his numbers probably way more objectively true than the latter. The other is just way too subjective, because here's why. And I say this, somebody knows Joel, and I like Joel, but here's the issue. If you're living as a Christian in Gaza and you're still alive right now, is it possible to likely that you have had to indicate some level of
acquiescence?
Yeah, because I didn't want to use the word allegiance. That was going too far. So I was looking for a word before that. That's the perfect word, okay? Some level of acquiescence to the powers that be, and we all know what the powers that be are, okay? The likelihood of that is high, okay? So is that just I'm in survival mode? It can be. Is that, well, culturally, I have more in common with, these Arab speaking and identifying people than I do these Jews across the West Bank. So I have some sympathies where that's concerned to begin with. Possible. We'd have to go, I think both of them are very possible, and we'd have to go on a case-by-case basis and in either instance to ascertain which it is. Okay? So I would say he is objectively probably pretty close to on the mark about the minuscule amount of Christians that are there. And I would say he's at least has a subjective case about some portion of people identifying as Christians in that region. Whether I would say it's 100%, I wouldn't be confident saying that. But to then act like I saw this go the other way too, including because again, I got friends on both sides of this. I saw people I love and respect on the other side of this say, I can't believe you would even say that. Well, I mean, come on. I mean, listen, we've been sitting here on this show, Todd, for how many years talking about how much, whether it's social justicism has, that's Megan's book, Marxism infiltrating the evangelical church in America, or it's called liberation theology south of the equator has infiltrated Catholicism, in the countries where the previous pope came from. We don't have to sit here and, act as if everybody claiming the name of Christ is completely pure and has, no idols and no biases. So I would not be confident. I would not be comfortable going as far as Joel did, but I also think it was preposterous to act as if everything Joel said could not possibly be true. So in other words, I probably gave you an answer you're not satisfied with either way.
Yeah, a lot of people are on tilt about this weekend.
Yeah. Well, that goes again to the Epstein conversation you're just having. All right? I mean, I sent to my buddy Matthew Faraci, and I just did his podcast a couple weeks ago because a couple of real big heavy hitters in the Christians and Jews Aligned for Israel world listen to that. And I wanted to make sure I used Matt's podcast at his invite to send them some messages to understand where we're at, right? Okay. And I sent Matt a text over the weekend with the story going out about the Israeli government now not treating evangelical missionary and tourist groups very well when they come over to Israel. And I said to Faraci, I said, listen, this is way more damaging to than any Groyper or Candace Owens crap. Okay. Because this undercuts a lot of the reason for the congeniality between the two sides. And he wrote me back and said, hey, a lot of this is one particular bureaucrat with something up his rear end. We're going to get that fixed. And it did get fixed. So Mike Huckabee, who was complaining about it on Friday, he just put out a statement, the ambassador to Israel, just about, again, 15 minutes ago. So tons of breaking news this morning saying, hey, that's been dealt with. I'm satisfied with it. We can all move on. But again, this kind of gives an idea. This thing's on a knife's edge right now, okay, on many fronts, many fronts.
Next up, let's go to Michael Pfeiffer, who says, you often give Protestants the business for completely disregarding church tradition. What are the 2 or 3 ancient traditions you wish they would respect or bring back?
I don't know. Well, I'm gonna disagree with your premise because I don't think because something is an ancient tradition means that it automatically is good. Because I'm a sola scriptura guy. So I would hold ancient traditions up to that too. Okay. But rather than cite anything specific, I would actually this is now where I'm going to probably give more than you might expect. I just think as a general rule, tradition should be venerated more in the Protestant church. I just think as a just a general ecclesiastical asset, or in addition to our liturgy, to know with those who walked and lived out our faith what they did before us in a very real world. What they did to be the hands and feet of the gospel, what they did to be the body of Christ, facing many of the same challenges that we do today, some of them to a greater extent, some of them to a lesser extent. I mean, I just think as a general rule, that is a very, very valuable tool. And one of the reasons why I think that you've never seen an evangelical on the Supreme Court, one of the reasons why that you typically see Catholics and Jews way overperform evangelicals politically. I don't think it has anything to do with any kind of, the Zionists took over the institutions and the Romanists have control. Okay. Yeah, the Romanists took over the culture that wouldn't even elect a Catholic president until the 1960s. Come on, man. Come on. I think a lot of it is both of those religious viewpoints carry a high weight on tradition and add intellectual depth and context that much of Protestantism, specifically evangelicalism, does not have and doesn't even realize it doesn't have it. Like it'd be one thing to just look at various aspects of tradition. Like you've mentioned Origen before. Let me give you an example, because Origen kind of went crazy at the end, right?
He castrated himself, became the Bible literate. Kind
of became crazy, right? Origen, my understanding researching the whole Mary debate, is he was also, though, one of the very first saints first church fathers to advocate, like as early as the 2nd century, for the veneration of Mary. Am I wrong on that? That's been just my own research that I've done on this particular subject. Okay. So it would be one thing to, even just as a Protestant with sola scriptura as a guide, to just look at tradition on a case-by-case basis and just decide you think wide swaths of it don't line up with the Word of God and should be rejected. That would at least indicate taking it seriously. What I'm talking about is we're not even to that viewpoint. We're not even to that vantage point. I don't think a lot of people that call themselves Protestants in my audience even know what an Origen is or was. Origen, Steve, are you doing comic book movies again? What are you talking about? No, totally different spelling. Okay, not talking about that at all. I mean, you should really know, a lot of the context of your faith. And to me, what tradition provides is a lot of that context. What happened? I mean, I would argue the book of Acts is the first book of tradition, right? The first group of people who were given a missiology and then had to go out and carry it out and live it out in a real world. What did that look like? I think as a construct, much more than specifics, as a construct, the availability of that as a tool in the toolkit of the Protestant Christian thinker is greatly lacking, which is why we're greatly lacking in Protestant Christian thinking.
Do you think that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to do, I think, this weekend when he talked about Mary and we need to have a greater respect for her? Without going into the details of Mariology specifically, do you think he's jiving with...
Knowing Charlie, again, I wouldn't say we're like best buds, but I do know him some. Him and I've had, several different theological conversations. He operates at a bandwidth and a level far beyond the vast majority of other evangelical Christians I've encountered in this industry and movement of ours. So given that would be my guess. Having not heard the conversation, I am aware of what you're talking about, but I haven't actually listened to it. But that would be my guess, is that he is someone that way higher than the average American evangelical, is way more versed in church history, debates, doctrines, traditions, things of that nature. It's just not wise. I don't know how else to put it. It's just unwise to lack context for your philosophy and belief system. It's just not wise.
Next up, we go to J.K. Sellers. Sadly, I've seen a lot of Protestants on X lately claiming other Christians aren't Christians because they teach fill in the blank or don't believe fill in the blank. I've seen this with Catholics too. Why do we do this to each other? We will need unity when the real persecution arrives.
So I agree with your latter point, but I'm also at times encouraged by this. Because again, this is where tradition comes into play. All right? Every year, I put out my favorite meme every Christmas. My all-time favorite meme every Christmas, what is it? It's an iconography of St. Nicholas who says, all right, I came to give kids presents and to punch heretics, and I'm all out of presents. Okay? I mean, the unity that you were sold before wasn't the right kind of unity.
Correct.
It was based off of ignorance, complacency, laziness, lack of passive aggressiveness. No confrontation could be had. Okay, that's not the right. That's milquetoast pablum. That's not a unity. So we're departing from that. Okay, which is good, and that means now there's going to be more friction now that we're ripping off a lot of Band-Aids. Okay, and there's going to be some scabbing and going to be some bruising. And this has kind of been the history of the church, guys. Go back to the book of Acts. Paul has falling outs. You know, he rebukes Peter in full view of the rest of the one of the very first conclaves in Jerusalem. There is friction. Peter later writes, that Paul guy, some of the stuff he writes, man, is wow. Okay? I mean, there's going to be friction. And friction is a good thing. All right? So I'm much more comfortable with the environment we have now than what we had before, you know? And I understand, listen, there are things some people say that within my own peer group that I go, okay, I get it. But I'm unless we're doing like blatant heresy and blatant anti-Semitism, meaning I cannot come up with a single reason why you are saying that about Jewish people other than you just hate them. But you need to understand, though, that throughout much of church history, there was very little regard for Judaism as a religion, very little regard for the term Talmudic Judaism isn't something that just a bunch of groypers came up with on Twitter 6 weeks ago. Right, this is terminology, again, out of the history of the church, out of tradition. Okay? So there are historic reasons why Christians and Jews have not always gotten along. Most of the red is frankly in the Christian ledger, but the Jewish ledger isn't painted black here, Keith Richards. All right, there's some real differences here. Things that have separated families, clans, civilizations. So one of the side effects and symptoms of people getting tougher and realizing that being nicer than God is not the 11th commandment that somehow God forgot to put on the third tablet that he just misplaced before he sent Moses down the mountain. This is going to be one of the side effects of that. So we all got to get a little tougher. We all got to get a little more resolved. Okay? A little thicker skin. Because this is going to be a symptom now of people taking this more seriously. So I agree with your latter point, right? We're trying to model that as best we can on this show. I have points I am not giving to Mr. Erzin, no matter how much I happen to like him. All right? So, but he is free to give his points as well because it doesn't interfere with our show's larger mission. Now, here's the thing, though. If we were specifically planting churches here, some of our disagreements might get in the way of the larger mission, and we would not maybe at that point have to say, we got to go our way here for like Fleetwood Mac. Love you, man. See you. We'll get together, next year at the July 4th parade. But, our differences here in terms of planning a church are just too steep. We can't make this work, So that's, again, we got to think in categories. Are we talking about what is specifically liturgical, ecclesiastical, and how we're going to worship and do church? Are we talking more broadly about how we're going to make sure we get to do things like liturgy and ecclesiastical teaching so we can still have our churches without facing persecution? Those can sometimes be two separate agendas, But to me, when this thing starts getting even healthier, you're actually going to see more of this conflict, not less. And it's not always going to be nice. And throughout church history, it wasn't always very nice either. So keep that in mind too. All right. It's a little bit like raising a son, when the peach fuzz now becomes, a full beard he has to shave. And you're like, he's becoming a man. On the other hand, though, now he's looking at you with that look in his eye that you used to have, sizing you up and thinking, I don't know if the old man still got it. I think I can take him. You kind of like that because you're trying to raise a boy into a man. At the same token, you're a little unnerved that he's looking at you as his dad like that. You know what I'm saying? That's a pretty good analogy of what this is going to go like. So buckle up, tighten the chin straps. Okay. These scrimmages, and you know what? Any good football team, man, you want the scrimmages to be harder than the games. All right. So when you go out there and play the real enemy, that's a walk in the park compared to how physical practice was. So you ready? We're going to see even more of this.
Next up, we go to Trumpet Tiger, who asks, what is the closest podcast to the Steve Deace Show in terms of tone, banter, pop culture, real world segments, fun, and worldview? Biblical perspectives that worldview is destiny.
I don't know. I'm not saying we're like, one of a kind. That's really a question I'd ask you guys. You guys tell me that. Because I don't have a lot of time to sample a lot of other shows, and on purpose I don't, because so much time and energy goes into this show that I need to get away from it. Okay? So when I'm not, prepping for this or a book or some other project I'm working on, chances are I'm listening to a theology podcast or a sports podcast just to completely get away from this so it doesn't overwhelm me. So I probably would ask you guys that question. I will tell you, when Salem brought me in, I think I've said this on the air before, when Salem first brought me in, their goal was they were looking for somebody who does what Glenn Beck does. Somebody that can fuse, meta philosophy and theology into a current events program, but from an explicitly evangelical perspective. So, that's what Salem was looking for when they first gave me a time slot there on their Big Bird. But I'd leave that up to you, which is ironic because I didn't know Glenn Beck at the time, and now we've been working together for the last 8 years. But, I'd probably ask you guys that question, meaning you guys, the audience. You would know that. You guys get to sample more of this stuff than I do.
Next, we go to Dennis Holzcha, who says or asks, will President Trump be able to persuade the powers that be to change the names back to the Washington Redskins and the Cleveland Indians? The Redskins were my team as a child. I hated that they changed the name.
I agree. Now, I will say I've always thought the term Redskin is way different than Braves, Indians, and the other things. All right. But that notwithstanding, this thing got so off the rails that, I remember Eastern Michigan University was the Hurons, and the Board of Regents in Michigan changed the name when I was in high school over the objection of the Huron tribe, who went to testify and say, we love it.
There's just a poll that came out again. Native Americans aren't against the term Redskins.
If that's the case, then that's the one I've always singled that one out because I could see why that would be a pejorative. But the rest of these are honoring of traditions and legacies. You're taking on, branding that indicates you're not naming yourselves the Braves because you thought these people were weak and you want to go out there and lose every game. All right, but because you thought they were tough and badasses, and that's the branding that you want to emulate. That's why when you name your team after an animal, no one chooses anteaters or aardvarks. All right, tigers and lions and bears. Okay, oh my. All right, so the whole thing has gone beyond silly, and I think it would be excellent branding. And I think a lot of this was just done because 6 sports writers, and why am I talking about Christine Brennan, had their panties in a wad about this. And so everyone thought they had to appease this particular group of journalists, all right, to make this happen. And frankly, it's retarded. So if we can bring that back, why can't we bring back Redskins?
Agreed.
Mike Benz is going to join us next. Hey, I've got 2 questions for you. Number 1, have you considered how your investments might unknowingly be funding policies that are anathema to your traditional American values? Number 2, are your hard-earned investment dollars being used to oppose the administration and the agenda you just voted for in the last election? If you answered yes to one or both of those questions, you know what? Your investment should be working as hard as you do and align with what you believe in. And yet many of us don't realize that you can make that happen. That's why you want to go with our friends over at Constitution Wealth, because unlike many other advisors, they can specifically screen your investments to make sure they line up with your God-given values, ensuring your money supports businesses that honor the God that our rights come from. So don't let your wealth unknowingly, everything you work so hard for, be used now, weaponized against you. In fact, it could be your greatest weapon in the culture war right now. If you go with our friends at Constitution Wealth, get started with a free consultation today at constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Again, get started with a free consultation today at constitutionwealth.com/blaze. And remember that Constitution Wealth is a registered investment advisor. You should review their disclosures at constitutionwealth.com to understand their services and fees. Pardon me. All investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. I am a client of the firm. This is a paid endorsement, but my opinions are my own. Well, this is a connection long overdue. I first heard the name Mike Benz from Ginny Thomas, who texted me a couple of years ago and said, hey, have you heard about this guy? I just learned about him, and his work is fantastic. Been following him ever since, and the timing of finally getting him on the show here could not be more serendipitous. So let's welcome him to the program. Mike, my name is Steve Deace, brother. It's an honor to have you with us. How are you?
Honored to be here. Thanks for all the work you do, and Ginny's fantastic as well.
You know, I kind of described you to our audience, and of course, a lot of them are going to see your work over the last couple of years and know you, but I've kind of described you as kind of researcher extraordinaire. But since this is the first time you're on the show, kind of give our audience your background a little bit before we get into the specific matters we're going to discuss.
Yeah, I was a corporate lawyer in New York for almost a decade, working mostly on tech and then a little bit of finance, private equity, hedge fund law stuff. And then I got wrapped up in the internet censorship story in the 2016 election. I saw what was happening to free speech on the internet and became kind of monomaniacally obsessed with trying to chronicle exactly what was happening and who was doing it and why. And I kind of came at it with a very different thesis than I think a lot of people at the time who were blaming Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and Susan Wojcicki from YouTube. I saw that there were clear touch points to the U.S. government, particularly around the foreign policy side, who was funding the censorship technology and leaning on the tech platforms to do these coercive censorship measures. And so I started writing a book on it and a documentary about it and publishing about it. And that sort of took me into conversations with the Trump White House. I ended up working at the Trump White House and becoming a speechwriter and sort of tech policy advisor. And then I, from there, went to the State Department and ran the cyber portfolio. And then when during the Biden term, I kind of took that skill set private and started a foundation. It's called Foundation for Freedom Online, where we've been breaking open essentially the censorship industrial complex and then all the related issues adjacent to it, because to understand what drove the censorship, you need to understand the inner workings of how the State Department, the Pentagon, USAID, and the intelligence services work. So through that sort of free speech portal, a lot of issues, particularly around the crooked intelligence state, have been surfaced.
Well, that brings us to the matter at hand of Jeffrey Epstein. Based on the best available information that you have, and then your ability to connect dots and fill in contextual blanks there to come to conclusions, whom was he? Whom was he actually working for? What's real? What's live? What's Memorex here, Mike?
Well, what we know is that he was a financier who started his career at Bear Stearns and then claimed to have clients during the Iran-Contra scandal who were tightly connected to U.S. intelligence, such as Adnan Khashoggi. And then he went on to be involved with the Clinton White House, 17 visits there, as well as the Clinton Foundation, claimed to be a co-founder of the Clinton Global Initiative. He also had high-level contacts in high parts of the government, both in the U.S. and then as well as multiple foreign countries, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the UK, France. And what the through line that seems to connect all of these different connections appears to be his role as a financial liaison for deals and investments that would bridge the gap on matters of, I guess, high finance and then also government activity. And there's lots of ways to understand this story, but a lot of this comes down to the great unanswered question, because we have to speculate about these things because the Justice Department has been mum. We know that the 2008 sweetheart plea deal that Jeffrey Epstein was struck, that ended up getting relitigated in 2018, 2019 during his second arrest. What was reported by Vicky Ward, the mainstream media, was that he told Trump transition officials that he was told to back off Epstein because he belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone because it was above his pay grade. And when you look at the circumstances of that plea deal, that it was that there was no consent of the victims in striking it, that he ran over the Maria Villanueva, the lead prosecutor, in order to strike that sweetheart plea deal. And then 3 days after that story was reported in 2019 about Epstein belonging to intelligence, when Alex Acosta did a public press conference and was asked, I believe by Reuters, publicly, if it was true that he was told to back off Epstein because he belonged to intelligence, Acosta balked at the question, kind of shuffled nervously and said, don't believe everything that you read, but I can neither confirm nor deny. And you look at that sequence and you say, okay, well, the whole Alex Acosta had to step down as Secretary of Labor over this scandal. And if it's true what Vicky Ward reported, that he said that Epstein belonged to intelligence, well, that then turns everything Epstein was involved in, where he has just remarkable connections to the highest levels of the intelligence and statecraft apparatus, going back to the 1980s. Then it kind of inverts the much of the history of Epstein as a financier. And a great example of this is something like Southern Air Transport, which was the airline. It was a CIA proprietary airline used for Iran-Contra in the 1980s, and which made stops in the U.S. Virgin Islands when the CIA was depositing guns and drugs and cash to run the operation in Latin America there. And they were doing it out of the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Jeffrey Epstein would later purchase Little St. James, just 2 miles away from St. Thomas, where Southern Air Transport was. It was based in Miami, and then as soon as Iran-Contra folded up, in 1994, Southern Air Transport moved from Miami to Columbus, Ohio, where Jeffrey Epstein was living. He had a residence there where Les Wexner, his financial sponsor, had the largest house in all of Ohio there. And while he had power of attorney over the Limited, which Southern Air Transport said it moved to Ohio specifically to serve it. So how does the CIA proprietary airline used for logistics for covert operations during Iran-Contra, where Jeffrey Epstein appeared to have significant touch points through Adnan Khashoggi and the like, then go on to service Jeffrey Epstein's proprietary conglomerate business enterprise that he had power of attorney? You and I can't just sort of negotiate that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. When the State Department seized the second largest residence in New York City from Iran in the 1990s, they leased it out specifically to Jeffrey Epstein. You and I can't just have the United States Department of State as our personal landlord. You and I don't just get 17 visits, to the White House with Bill Clinton while he's president, and then help him create his international philanthropy that brings together world leaders for shared geopolitical objectives. To say nothing of all the foreign entanglements. But I think that more evidence is needed when it comes to things like the sexual blackmail. I don't think when you talk about CIA and foreign intelligence in the Epstein story, it relates to the underlying crime that he was charged for. I think that this was a money man, and the CIA has a rich history of using outside financiers to broker the deals that juice the covert action that the CIA needs. And to the extent that Epstein was playing that role, you can see why they could have leaned on the Justice Department to let him off easy, as they have in countless cases in the past, from Rolando Masfer to Mark Rich.
All right, I've got 6 minutes and 3 questions I think the audience definitely needs me to ask you in that time. So let's take the one that's probably the quickest to answer first. I'm struggling with the idea that Democrats left behind proof that's directly linking to Barack Obama as an instigator of the Russian collusion hoax, knowing in advance it was a hoax. But yet they doctored or tampered with whatever Epstein documentation there is. Am I right to be skeptical of that, or is there something I'm ignorant of and don't understand?
I think you're right to be skeptical on that. I think that the Epstein hot potato is something that's passed from party to party depending on who's in power. There's this phenomenon for the past 20 years where whatever out of power party uses the Epstein hot potato as a weapon against the party that's in power for not doing the thing that the out of power party failed to do. The fact is Epstein is a very, very, very bipartisan story. The Epstein story started with the Ronald Reagan Republican foreign policy activities against Iran after the 1979 Iran revolution, and then it switched to the Democrats when Jeffrey Epstein got in with Bill Clinton, and then it switched, back to Republicans. It appears, with a lot of involvement with Republican financiers from Les Wexner to Leon Black to far beyond. The fact is I think the Epstein story is a remarkably, it's one of the few truly bipartisan things in Washington. And so there's almost a mutually assured destruction, a kind of, if you publish this, I'm taking you with me, that has been happening between the Democrats and Republicans ever since Epstein's first 2006 indictment.
Obviously, this network, my show, we've been strong advocates of the administration in the last election and moving on. But myself, Glenn, and many others here, Liz Wheeler, who was one of the influencers brought to the White House for that ridiculous thing, that her and others were basically just completely bamboozled and made fools out of. So our network has several people here that are a little skeptical on this front where Epstein is concerned, particularly with the president's sudden about face here in terms of releasing information. In your view, what is more likely, Mike, that they doctored things to make it look like Trump is way more involved, like this stupid, silly story the Wall Street Journal's now got to get sued their pants off for, or that because of his intelligence entanglements and what the collateral damage that may be with certain alliances, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze of opening that up, particularly given how tenuous some of those alliances are within the president's own base right now. What's more likely, do you think?
Oh, definitely the second one. And I would note that, even beyond the intelligence, there is the fact that many friends and GOP donors and the like are also involved in this. And I understand Trump's point on this. Trump made a point, I think he had a dedicated truth on this, saying that context matters. And one of the reasons not to disclose all the names associated with Epstein was because it will be, reprinted without context, and the context matters. And I think that, to his point, that is true in the sense that, look, I had access to that binder as well. It was brought to my birthday party earlier this month, and I speed read through it, and I saw Donald Trump's name personally on the Epstein flight logs 2 or 3 times in the 1990s. But that was also a decade before Epstein was indicted the first time. And so it's very likely that Trump didn't know that any of this was going on, as well as everybody who did business with Epstein in the 80s and 90s. You can look at, I don't think Leon Black, for example, was involved in that, even though he paid Jeffrey Epstein $170 million after the first indictment. I don't think that Howard Lutnick was involved in, any sort of child sex trafficking or anything like that, even though, he's got, connections through, the house that he purchased and being right, next door neighbor practically and the like, and connections through the family. And there's about 20 different Trump officials who turn up in the officials or donors who turn up in the Jeffrey Epstein story. And so between that and the apparent intelligence ties, you can see why Trump is kind of between a rock and a hard place, between his base's demands for disclosures and his network's demands for discretion or privacy about this. But the fact is this really puts the base and the donor class, as well as the international alliances, I think, at a kind of loggerheads. And I don't think the answer is necessarily that either side wins completely, but there's got to be something on this that shows at least a good faith attempt to be responsive to donor concerns. So it was good to see that they moved to unseal the grand jury indictments. We don't know how that's going to fall. But the fact is Pam Bondi right now can walk down the office to the Office of Professional Responsibility, which did a 21-month investigation of Alex Acosta's plea deal with Jeffrey Epstein in 2008. This was produced in November 2020, 2 weeks after the 2020 election results. Bill Barr was still in charge of the Justice Department. They spent 21 months at the Justice Department looking into that plea deal and including Epstein's alleged intelligence ties. But we don't have that transcript of what they asked Alex Acosta. Pam Bondi could retrieve that right now and make that public right now. So we know exactly what the Justice Department looked into, what they asked Acosta, and what they didn't ask Acosta.
All right. I've got time now I've only got time for a yes or no, which is unfair, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Over the weekend, Alan Dershowitz, Epstein's former attorney, published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying he knows who his clients were. There were some high-value clients. None of them were politicians. He wasn't Mossad or CIA intelligence asset whatsoever, at least didn't tell him that. Yes or no, you buy Dershowitz's explanation here?
Partially. I think that's a technically worded statement.
Okay.
I don't believe that Epstein would be classified as an asset. I don't think he was recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency, and I doubt that he was formally recruited by Israeli intelligence. What you see, I did a study.
I've got 20 seconds. 20 seconds. Go ahead, Mike.
I did a study about 10 different CIA financial middlemen. And what they're 8 out of 10 didn't have a 201 file. They were never recruited. What happens is they're a part of an outside network of financiers. They're known as contacts or cooperative contacts, liaisons, facilitators. They don't work for intelligence. They occasionally, periodically work with intelligence when there's a matter of mutual profit for both sides. When the CIA wants a deal done that will advance an oil deal in the Middle East or an arms arrangement, but not working. And this is how you get Epstein saying at one point that he worked for the CIA and then denied it later. And so I don't think that he was an asset in that way.
Okay.
But I think, yeah.
I got to go, Mike. Sorry. We'll bring you back. Romans 8:28.